Hello everybody, my name is Cami Palmer, and today I will be taking you through the first part of the digestive system. First, I just wanted to highlight I will have 4 different slides of key learning objectives just to highlight different aspects of my slideshow that are essential for your exam. And to get started, the digestive system is one big disassembly line that breaks down the ingested food into smaller and smaller pieces, absorbing nutrients, water, salt, etc., and the leftover material gets secreted as waste. The main part of the digestive system is the alimentary canal or the gastrointestinal tract. This is a 20-foot long tube which goes in one direction and is in fact hollow where the food travels. The hollow space in the tube is called the lumen, and the lumen is technically considered the outside of the body. Food ingestion isn't considered inside the body until nutrients have entered the bloodstream. In the gastrointestinal tract, it goes as follows. It goes through the mouth, into the pharynx, the esophagus, stomach, small intestine, through the large intestine, out the rectum and anus. The mouth aids mostly in mechanical digestion. The pharynx is a muscular propulsion of materials into the esophagus, which will travel food down to the stomach while mechanical and chemical digestion takes place into the small intestines, where the majority of enzymatic digestion and absorption of water, organic, and different substances are absorbed, as well as the large intestine, until waste is excreted out of the rectum and the anus. You also have accessory digestive organs that can kind of be clarified into 2 different categories, with chemical and mechanical digestion. Chemical digestion is the breakdown of food via enzymes to facilitate nutrient absorption. Our main organs that facilitate this are your gallbladder, liver, and pancreas. They all release digestive juices like bile and enzymes into the small intestine to further break down food. Another key highlight to mechanical digestion is your salivary glands, which release enzymes and also lubricate your gastrointestinal tract. Then you have mechanical digestion, accessory organs like your mouth, teeth, tongue, and even like muscles in your stomach, which break down food by sheer force. Now getting into the peritoneum. The peritoneum is the broad fluid-producing serous membrane. It surrounds the abdominal cavity and holds the digestive organs in place. There are 2 major sections to the peritoneum. You have your parietal peritoneum and your visceral peritoneum. Your parietal lines the abdominal walls, and the visceral directly covers the abdominal organs. You do have interperitoneal, which are organs that are fully surrounded by peritoneum, and you have retroperitoneal organs that are completely or partially posterior to the peritoneum. You also have your peritoneal cavity, which falls in between the parietal and the visceral peritoneum, which is filled with serous fluid. In there, you also have mesenteries, which are the double layer of the peritoneum, connected by visceral and parietal peritoneum. This holds organs in place. It has serous fluids, fat deposits providing cushions for organs, and also contains blood vessels, lymphatic vessels, and nerves. One last thing to note is your greater omentum is the largest mesentery on the greater curvature of your stomach. And then here is just another picture of right below your diaphragm that just shows the peritoneum. Another great view, another great picture. And then here is your second key learning objectives for the histology of the GI tract. Your GI tract, or lumen, is contained 4 different layers. You have your mucosa, submucosa, muscularis externa, and serosa. Your mucosa being the most innermost, and then your serosa being the outermost layer. Your mucosa's main function is to secrete mucus and digestive enzymes, and then absorb nutrients. There are also three parts to the mucosa. There's the epithelium, the lamina propria, and the muscularis mucosa. For epithelium, the epithelium is in direct contact with food, and there's two major types throughout this tract. You have stratified squamous epithelium, which is found in the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, and anal canal, basically everywhere where the peritoneum is not located. This holds a lot of fat cells and provides a protection against abrasion. Then there is also simple columnar epithelium with the stomach, small intestine, and large intestines, which hold goblet cells that secrete mucus, and enteroendocrine cells that secrete hormones into the interstitial space. They have a brief lifespan, however, to preserve the health of the canal. In your mouth, your cells only last about a couple of days, and in your gut, about a week. Then, following the epithelium is your lamina propria, which is loose connective tissue, contains blood and lymphatic vessels, and holds a cluster of lymphocytes. On the distal end of the lumen, you have your Prager's patches, which is a bulk of lymphatic sites. These defeat against pathogens in food-borne bacteria and foreign matter. After the lamina propria, you have your muscularis mucosae, which is a thin layer of smooth muscle tissue, which is in a constant state of tension that pulls your stomach and small intestine mucosa into folds. This increases the surface area for digestion and absorption. Next layer is your submucosae, which is right beneath the mucosae. This is a broad layer of dense connective tissue. Blood and lymphatic vessels are also found here. You have submucosal glands that release digestive secretions. And then you also have an integrated plexus it's called the submucosal or mesenteric plexus. The whole point of your integrated nerves is to regulate digestive secretions into the lumen and react to presence of food in the lumen as well. Going from the submucosa, you have the muscularis externa, which is a double layer of smooth muscle tissue. Typically, you have a circular inner layer and then a longitudinal outside layer. However, in the stomach, you can also have a third layer, which is in between the two, called oblique. Throughout the muscularis externa, you have another nerve plexus called the mesenteric or habitua's plexus. This aids in motility and rhythm of force of contraction of smooth muscles and can help move food along the digestive tract. Your mesenteric plexus and your submucosal plexus are both involved in the intrinsic nervous system, which contains over 100 million nerves that can control the GI tract. As well, another part of the muscularis externa, where smooth muscle is typically found under involuntary control, and skeletal muscle is typically found in areas of voluntary control, like the mouth, pharynx, and anus. Your fourth and final layer is the serosa. Your serosa is only present in the digestive system within the abdominal cavity or peritoneal. Things like your stomach, small intestine, and large intestine. This also secretes fluid to prevent against abrasion between organs. Where the peritoneal is not present, like the mouth, pharynx, esophagus, and anus, you have your aventia, which holds organs in place near the anterior surface of the vertebral column. This is a dense sheet of collagen fibers in place of the serosa. Starting the third learning objectives is your digestive tract from your mouth to your stomach. Starting off, we will talk about the oral cavity, which is lined by stratified squamous epithelium, mostly non-keratinized, that helps protect the mouth from mechanical and chemical digestion. In your mouth, you have your oral vestibule, which is the area between your lips and your teeth. You have your cheeks, your tongue, which we'll talk about soon, and your palate. The interior part of your palate is your hard plate. which consists of the maxillary and palatine, and then the posterior part is your soft plate, which is skeletal muscle that assists in chewing, swallowing, yawning, and singing. From your soft plate hangs your uvula, which moves up to prevent fluid and liquid from entering your nasal cavity when you swallow. It can also make a sound when you snore. And the palate is arched, allowing for chewing and respiration at the same time. You also have your palatine tonsils, which are lymphatic tissue and aids in protection of microorganisms. As you can see right here, here's just a brief summary of the 4 layers of the lumen in the mouth, some defining features, and its function, repeated again. Another feature I would like to highlight is the tongue. The tongue is made up of all skeletal muscle. It facilitates ingestion, mechanical digestion, chemical digestion, sensation like taste, temperature, texture, and swallowing and vocalization. It is attached to the mandible, the styloid process, and the hyoid bone. It is covered in stratified squamous epithelium. It also has papillae, which are ridges on the tongue of the top and the side. The papillae help with the touch sensation, taste, and manipulate foods. You also have your linguinal frenulum, which tethers your tongue to the floor of the mouth and has folds of mucous membranes. A short or misformed lingual frenulum is called a congeal anomaly occlusa and can cause severe impaired speech. Next up, after the oral cavity is quite easy, is the pharynx. There is 3 defining features, special parts of the pharynx. You have the nasopharynx, which is right behind the nasal cavity, aids in breathing and speech. Then you have your oral pharynx, which is right behind your oral cavity, aiding in breathing and digestion. And then your laryngopharynx, which is the last part near the larynx, also aiding in breathing and digestion. The pharynx is consisted of stratified squamous epithelium. It is adventitia, because it is above the peritoneum, and then the submucosa and the muscularis externa is just the same. Next up is the esophagus. Your esophagus is a 10-inch long muscular tube that goes from the pharynx to the stomach. It contains stratified squamous epithelium cells. The first 1/3 of your esophagus is skeletal muscle, the middle 1/3 is skeletal and smooth muscle, and the lower 1/3 of your esophagus is all smooth muscle. The main goal of the esophagus is just to move food or your bolus into your stomach. It does this through something called peristalsis, which is a rhythmic phase of smooth muscle contractions that propel the bolus. 2 defining features are the upper esophageal sphincter, which controls movement of food into the esophagus, and the lower esophageal sphincter, or the cardiac sphincter, which controls food into the stomach. Quickly, I just want to highlight a process from the first 3 parts of the GI tract called deglutition, also known as swallowing, aided by muscle, mucus, and saliva. The first part of deglutition is the voluntary phase, where after chewing, your mouth closes, your tongue moves up and back to push the bolus into the oral pharynx. The second part is pharyngeal phase, where receptors are stimulated in your oral pharynx, impulses are sent to your medulla oblongata, causing your soft plate and uvula to close up the nasal pharynx, and your laryngeal muscle constricts, closing off the trachea / glottis with the epiglottis, and your pharyngeal constrictal muscles will move the bolus through the oral pharynx, through the laryngopharynx, and relax the upper esophageal sphincter and allow food to move through the esophagus. Your third and final phase is the esophageal phase, which is controlled by the medulla oblongata as well, where peristalsis starts to occur and propels the bolus through the esophagus close to the stomach, where the lower esophageal sphincter will relax and allow the bolus into the stomach. The next part of the GI tract is your stomach. One misconception about the stomach is that is the location where digestion takes place the most. But really, the stomach is a temporary holding chamber. It mixes your bolus with digestive juices and converts it into chyme. Then it will spit out portions of chyme into the duodenum or the small intestine. There's also 4 regions to the stomach. The top part, which is the cardia, the outside, which is the fundus, the main part, which is called the body, and the bottom part of the stomach is called the pylorus. At the end of the pylorus, there's a pyloric sphincter, which controls the emptying of the stomach into the duodenum. The muscularis externa is also very interesting in this region because not only does it have circular and longitudinal layers, but it also has a third smooth muscle layer called oblique. The mucosa layer consists of simple columnar epithelium and has large folds called rugae, which allows for the stomach to expand 4 times its size. Some other main features of the stomach are epithelial and mucus cells that secrete mucus as a protective coat. You have a vast number of gastric pits. There are also parietal cells, which release hydrochloric acid to maintain the stomach's high acidity, chief cells that release pepsinogen, an active enzyme form of pepsin, and endocrine cells, which are release regulatory hormones, gastrin, and histamine. Finally, for my last set of slides, I will be talking about the GI tract from the duodenum to the rectum. Following the stomach, you have the small intestine, which is a 10-foot long meter tube named for its small diameter. Its main role is for absorption, but also includes some digestion as well. There are 3 parts of the small intestine: the duodenum, which is the shortest part that facilitates chemical digestion, the jejunum, which is the middle portion, about 3 feet long, and then the ileum, which is the longest and last portion, lasting 6 feet long. The ileum joins the cecum, the first part of the large intestine, through the ileocecal valve, and the duodenum connects the stomach by the pyloric sphincter. The jejunum and the ileum main roles are to digest nutrients that are absorbed. The mucus layer contains of simple columnar epithelium. The muscularis externa is longitudinal and circular layers, and the outermost layer is serosa because it is in the peritoneum. 3 major features are the pilaceae circularis, which are deep ridges to facilitate absorption. Then you also have villi, which are circular folds, small like hair-like projections that increase surface area. There's about 20 to 40 per millimeter squared. And then you have microvilli, which are brush border enzymes lining the villi. You also have 200 million per millimeter square. The role of the small intestine also has segmentation. Smooth muscle repeatedly contracts and relaxes. This does not propel chyme, but mixes it with most of the digestive juices. The jejunum and the ileum pushes the mucosa in order to be absorb nutrients into the bloodstream. And then peristalsis occurs, which will move chyme forward along the tract. Typically, chyme takes around 3 to 5 hours to move through the small intestine. Next up is the large intestine, which finishes absorption of nutrients, water, and salts. It is half as long as the small intestine, but 2 times its diameter. At first, through the ileocecal valve, you have your appendix, which is the widening tube that connects to the cecum. And then you have your cecum, which is a sac-like structure, continuous absorption of H2O and salts. Following the cecum, you have your ascending colon, your right colon flexure, your transverse colon, your left colon flexure, your descending colon, your sigmoid colon that leads to your rectum and your anal canal. The large intestine is made up of simple columnar epithelium, and then it also is serosa because it is still part of the peritoneal. After your sigmoid colon leads to the rectum and eventually the anus. Your rectum and anus is made out of stratified squamous epithelium cells. It is adventia because it is no longer part of the peritoneum. Defining features are its tennae coli, which are 3 bands of smooth muscle that make up the longitudinal layer of the muscularis externum. Then you have hostra, which are pouches of tennae coli, which give a wrinkled appearance. And then another is the epiglottic appendages, which are fat-filled sacs of the visceral peritoneum attached to the tennae coli. The main feature of the rectum and anus is just defecation and removal of feces. Also, at the end of the anus, you have 2 different sphincters. The internal anal sphincter, which is smooth muscle tissue, aids in voluntary defecation, and your external anal sphincter, which is skeletal muscle, aids in voluntary defecation. The last very thing I want to talk about is bacteria flora. There are trillions of bacteria that live in the large intestine. The bacteria give no harm as long as it stays in the gut lumen. It actually has some benefits like facilitating chemical digestion and absorption, synthesize certain vitamins, mainly biotin, pancreatic acid, and vitamin K, and also increase immune response. And that is all I have for today. Here are just some references, and I hope you guys can use this as a great study tool for your exam.